Today we are going to study active and passive voice. So, before going into the details, let's see one example. For example, Ram plays chess. Ram is your subject, plays is your verb, and chess is your object. Ram here in this is at subject position and object here is at object position. So, this sentence is said to be in active voice. But now what happens in passive voice is that your subject and object position remains the same, which means that here you have your subject position and you have your object position over here. But now what happens is that your object comes at the place of subject position and your subject comes at the place of object position. And so this kind of sentence is said to be in passive voice. Now let's define its definition. Now what is an active voice? Now what is an active voice? So a verb is said to be in active voice. A verb is said to be in active voice when the person or thing denoted by subject is doer of the action. And in this case, subject is said to be active. Now, in the above example, your doer of the action is Ram and Ram is active in this case. So the verb plays is said to be in active voice. Now, next comes the passive voice. Now, what does passive voice means is that a verb is said to be in passive voice when the person or thing denoted by subject is receiver of the action. So, in the above example, you can see that chess was the receiver of the action and here the subject is passive. It is not active but it is passive. So, the verb plays is said to be in passive voice. Now, this was all about the definition part. Now, let's move on to the rules to convert an active voice to passive voice. Active voice to passive voice. Now, rule number 1. Change subject with object. Next rule is change object with subject. The most important rule is that always verb third form is used in passive voice. Next, add by if required after V3. Now, next rule, your helping verb is placed before V3. Now, according to this rule, as in the above example, you have seen that is was placed before played. So, is over there was your helping verb and it was placed before V3. Now, next rule is that if in your active voice you have will, shall or any modal verb, we use be before V3. Next rule, if you have continuous tense in active voice, we use being before V3. Next rule, if you have perfect tense in active voice, we use been before V3. Now, next on the one of the most important rule is that passive voice of only 8 tenses can be made out of your 14 out of your 12 tenses, only 8 tenses are there whose passive voice can be made. Now, the tenses whose passive voice cannot be made are, first one is your future continuous and your 3 perfect continuous tenses. These are the 4 tenses whose passive voice cannot be made. Now, let's see some of the cases. Let's see some of the cases for your passive voice. We'll look for the cases of assertive sentences. Next is your imperative sentences. And then we'll see the passive voices of interrogative sentences. We'll also see some of the other cases of active and passive voice. So let's see first one, that is the assertive sentences. Assertive sentences basically includes all the simple sentences that can be affirmative or negative. Now, all the 8 tenses whose passive voice can be made, they come under the category of assertive sentences. Let's discuss few of the cases about simple present tense. Simple present tense. Let's have an example of it. Suppose in your active voice, it's given Ram likes mango. Now, its passive voice can be made as mango is liked by Ram. Helping verb that is placed depends upon the tense of the sentence. So, after doing this example, let's see a table that will be helpful, or that will be it will be beneficial for you to remember what kind of helping verb you need to place in your active voice. So let's see first the table and then we'll look for further examples. So here is your tense. Next is your simple. Here you have continuous form and now perfect tense. Now the 3 tenses: present tense. Next is your past tense. And then third is your future tense. So, in simple present tense, your passive voice is made using the helping verbs is am and are along with V3. And in continuous form you have is, am, are plus being plus V3. Now, and in present perfect you have it, has, have plus been plus V3. Now, I have not mentioned over here perfect continuous because passive voice of that tense cannot be made. Now, for the past tense you have was, were along with V3, and past continuous you have was, were plus being plus V3. Now, in the perfect tense you have had plus been plus V3. Now in the simple future you have will, shall plus be plus V3. In continuous form, you cannot have anything since passive voice of future continuous cannot be made. Now in perfect tense you have will, shall plus have plus been plus V3. So this was all about the table that will help you to while you do your passive voice conversion. Let's see one more table that is related to the change of persons that you need to do while making your passive voice. For example, if you have subjects like I, we, you, they, he, she, it. So I gets changed to me, we to us, you as it is, they to them, he to him, she to her, and it to it itself. Let's take an example of present perfect. Fine. Present perfect. Let's take an example. I have lost my purse. This is in your active voice. Now, its passive voice can be made my purse. Since it is your perfect tense, you will be using have along with the word been. My purse have been lost. Fine. I think it is more clear with that table. Now let's take some more examples. Let's take an example of past perfect. Yes, its example is they sold out the car. This is in your active voice. Now its passive can be made as the car had been sold out. This is your passive voice. Let's take an example of simple future tense. Example is I shall finish my work by 5 o'clock. Its passive voice can be made as my work shall be finished or like write to well by me by 5 o'clock. So this was the way we convert an active voice to passive voice of an assertive sentences. Let's take some more examples that are of some special cases. After that, we will be reading about imperative sentences or interrogative sentences. But let's see other types of sentences first. Let's take an example of the sentence containing that clause. If your sentence has that clause in its active voice, its passive voice can be made as it plus your helping verb plus V3 plus the whole that clause that is present in your active voice. Let's take an example of it to make it more clear. They believe that he killed his wife. Now here you have that clause. So its passive voice can be made if we see to the structure of its passive voice, it can be made very easily. For example, you need to write first it, then your helping verb, and it will be as per the tense of the active voice. So now in this case it will be is, then your third form of the verb, so it is believed, then your whole that clause comes as it is, so we write that he killed his wife. It is believed that he killed his wife. So I am writing one more sentence and that you need to tell it to me. Another sentence is that we admit that she has spoiled her life. So now you need to guess or you need to tell me the passive voice of the sentence. Now, let's see an example of the sentence in which your active voice has two objects. Active voice having two objects. Yes. Now, in such case, your active voice can be made by using either of the two objects. Let's take an example and see how their passive voice can be made. For example, he gave me a book. Now, this kind of sentence has two objects. One is your me and the other one is your book. Now, passive voice can be made by using either of the two objects. So let's take first object and then make it passive voice. Its passive voice can be like a book was given to me by him. Fine. So the next one. As in the earlier table, I told you the conversion that me is replaced with I. So here we will be using I. I was given a book by him. So I think it's much clear with this. Now, one more example and you need to tell me its answer. Next, the manager granted me the permission. So make its passive voice. Now, let's take another case in that your active voice has preposition in it. Now, when an active voice has preposition in it, you need to put the same preposition in your passive voice. For example, they laughed at the poor. They laughed at the poor. Now, it is in your active voice. This sentence has your preposition at in it. So you need to use that same preposition in your passive voice. So its passive voice can be made as the poor was laughed at. Let's take one more example. They looked after the child. Its passive voice is the child was looked after. You can write by them. I think it's clear with you. It's clear now. Next, we'll discuss the case of an infinitive. Infinitive. In that you have to plus your verb. To remember it, you have a subject, you have a way to convert it into its passive voice and it is subject plus verb plus object plus to be plus V3. Let's take an example to make it more clear. Yes, I want to kill a snake. Now here you have your infinitive to with kill. So its passive voice can be made as I want a snake to be killed. You can see from the format that was there in the passive voice that first you need to put the subject. So we place I over there. Then we need to put the verb. So we put want over there. Then you need to put your object. So we put a snake over there. And then your to along with the be and then your verb third form. So we put the verb killed over there, that is V3 of kill. Let's take one more example. We have a lot of work to do. Its passive voice can be made as we have a lot of work to be done. I hope it's clear with you. I hope this is clear to all. So this was all for today. In the next class, we'll be discussing about the imperative sentences along with the interrogative sentences. Okay.